Hey everyone, it's Alex, and today I am here to talk about my 15 best movies of 2016. In my previous video, I talked about my 15 worst films of 2016, so I could get those off my chest and focus on the positive. Now, while 2016 had a lot of god-awful movies, there were also so many great ones that I had to expand my list from a top 10 to a top 15. Heck, there were so many great films, I ended up having 19, yes, 19 honorable mentions. So I'm just going to read through those real quick, and then I'm going to dive into the top 15. So here we go. My honorable mentions are Swiss Army Man, Kubo and the Two Strings, Deepwater Horizon, Hacksaw Ridge, Midnight Special, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, Race, Everybody Wants Some, Finding Dory, Florence Foster Jenkins, Queen of Kotway, A Hologram for the King, The Light Between Oceans, Loving, 10 Cloverfield Lane, Lion, Knight of Cups, Southside with You, and Love and Friendship. Alright, now let's get into the top 15. Number 15, Moana. Disney has had a magnificent year with their animated films, and Moana is certainly proof of that. This was a beautiful, beautiful film. It had some of the most beautiful animation I have ever seen. The ocean just looked so beautiful. The island on which the titular character lived just looked so beautiful. Just all of the scenery was just so beautiful that you had to see it on a big screen to just be truly awed by it. This movie also had some fantastic direction from veteran Disney directors John Musker and Ron Clements, who previously directed The Little Mermaid and Aladdin. The voice cast in this movie is absolutely fantastic. Ayuli Cravalho, if that's how you say her name, was fantastic as Moana, and she beat out thousands of actresses for the role, and this is her film debut. And not only is she a fantastic actress, but a fantastic singer. Dwayne Johnson is also fantastic as Maui, and he too shows off just how good of a singer he can be. And the music in this movie is just gorgeous. The songs by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's best known as a Broadway composer for shows like In the Heights and Hamilton, are just fantastic. And Lin-Manuel Miranda has already been embraced by Disney. He's going to star alongside Emily Blunt in Mary Poppins Returns, which will hit theaters on Christmas Day 2018. And Alan Tudyk is also hilarious as this rooster named Hey Hey, who is the dumbest rooster you will ever see. Overall, this is everything I could want in a Disney animated musical, and this movie proves once again why Disney is still one of the best movie studios in the world. Number 14, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so you might be surprised that Rogue One is all the way near the bottom of the list. But I saw 108 films last year, so the fact that it's this high proves just how good it really is. And this is the first Star Wars anthology film. It's set in between episodes 3 and 4, which are Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and it explores how the plans for the Death Star were stolen. And how this movie leads up to A New Hope, particularly at the end, is just fantastic. All of the cast is fantastic, especially Felicity Jones as Jyn Erso, Diego Luna as Caspian, and Alan Tudyk, who's basically the anti-C-3PO. Ben Mendelsohn is really great as the villain Orson Krennic. Mads Mikkelsen is great as Galen Erso. I even like Forrest Whitaker. And Darth Vader also shows up in this film, and even though he's only in 2 scenes, it's just fantastic to see him. And it's even more fantastic that he's still being voiced by James Earl Jones. And the action scenes in this movie are phenomenal. Probably some of the best action I've seen in a Star Wars film since the Battle of Endor in Return of the Jedi. Overall, this is everything I could want in a Star Wars movie, and I cannot wait for Episode 8 coming out this December and the Han Solo anthology movie coming out in 2018. Star Wars, you continue to make us proud. Number 13, Zootopia. In my opinion, this is the best animated film of the year, and like Moana, it was also made by Disney. Adults, when they see this stuff, they will really think about it, and they will really notice the parallels that it has to real society, and it may even start a discussion between them and their children about these issues and how best to confront them. The animation is beautiful, the writing is fantastic, the directing is fantastic, and the voice cast is amazing. Jennifer Goodwin is wonderful as Judy Hopps. Jason Bateman is fantastic as Nick Wilde, and the chemistry between Judy and Nick when they're forced to team up with each other makes them one of the best duos of the year. Idris Elba is great as Chief Bogo, the police chief. J.K. Simmons is great as the mayor. Jenny Slate is great as his assistant, Miss Bellwether. There's not a bad performance in the whole cast. And the song Try Everything, which is written by Sia and performed by Shakira, is one of my favorite movie songs of the year. It got a Grammy nomination, but I wish it gotten some more awards nominations, like at the Golden Globes or the Critics' Choice. Hopefully it'll get an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song, because the Oscars do love Disney songs, but we'll see. But even if it doesn't get nominated, I'll still enjoy the song nonetheless. So if you like animated films that are not only entertaining, but also provide a strong message for you to think about, then Zootopia is one film that you cannot afford to miss. Number 12, The Jungle Book. Live-action remakes of Disney films have been hit or miss. Alice in Wonderland got a meh reception from critics and audiences, but last year there was hope when Cinderella got great reviews from both critics and audiences. And The Jungle Book may be the best live-action remake of a classic Disney animated film thus far. My God, Jon Favreau did an amazing job with this movie. The visuals in this movie are the best visual effects of the year. If this does not win the Oscar for Best Visual Effects, I will be stunned, because I have never seen visual effects like these. This movie was shot entirely on a soundstage in Los Angeles, so all the animals, the whole jungle, it's completely CGI, but it feels so real, as if they actually went to India, where this film is set, and shot everything there. The cast in this movie is perfect. Jon Favreau found the perfect kid to play Mowgli, a newcomer named Neil Setti, and he did a fantastic job. The animals are perfectly cast. Bill Murray is perfect as Baloo. Ben Kingsley is perfect as Bagheera. Idris Elba is perfect as Shere Khan. Lupita Nyong'o and Giancarlo Esposito are perfect as Raksha and Akela, the wolves that raise Mowgli. Scarlett Johansson is perfect as Kaa. Christopher Walken is perfect as King Louie. He even sings King Louie's famous I Wanna Be Like You song. The score by John Debney is fantastic. And I will go so far as to say this. This live-action Jungle Book is actually better than the animated original. I really mean that, because they expand upon the story and they give the characters more time to develop. Not that the animated movie is bad, it's very good, but this one expands upon it with more creative storytelling. And overall, I believe this is Jon Favreau's best film that he has ever done in his whole career, tied with Elf. If Disney wants to continue remaking their animated films into live-action films, let's hope they continue to be as good as this. I certainly hope Beauty and the Beast will be as good as this when it comes out in theaters in March. Number 11, Fences. This movie is an adaptation of the Tony Award and Pulitzer Prize-winning play by August Wilson about a former baseball player played by Denzel Washington who now is a garbage collector. He's trying to support his family, but he's frustrated by his failed goals that he's never achieved in life, and also troubled by a crisis that's brewing in the shadows that could destroy his whole family. Fences has often been hailed as one of the best African-American plays of all time, and having watched it, I can now understand why. this movie does a fantastic job of translating the play from the stage to the screen. Now granted, since it's set in just a few locations, it almost feels like you're watching a stage production at times, because stage productions are often different than film productions in scope and style. But that doesn't deter from the great things about this movie. Denzel Washington is fantastic. He has to recite these long monologues in a rapid tone, and how he manages to do it and direct himself and everyone else at the same time is just phenomenal. Viola Davis is amazing. Both she and Denzel Washington won Tony Awards when they did this on Broadway back in 2010. While I don't think Denzel Washington is as great as Casey Affleck in Manchester by the Sea in the Best Actor race, I do think Viola Davis should hands down win Best Supporting Actress, because her performance is mesmerizing, both in her quiet dramatic moments and in scenes where she just explodes with rage and anger at some of the things her husband reveals to her in that dramatic everything goes to hell moment. The rest of the cast, such as Giovanna Depo as Denzel Washington and Viola Davis' son, Stephen McKinley Henderson as Denzel Washington's friend, and McKelty Williamson as Denzel Washington's brother, they're all fantastic too. This film really provides a look into the kinds of struggles that African Americans were facing in their daily lives in the 1950s, and I think August Wilson's work here is wonderfully honored and given the respect that it deserves, and I think August Wilson is smiling down from heaven on this adaptation. Number 10, Jackie. As soon as this movie started, I completely forgot that I was watching Natalie Portman, and I totally felt like I was watching the real Jackie Kennedy come back to life on screen. Natalie Portman is fantastic. She nails the look of Jackie Kennedy, she nails the voice of Jackie Kennedy with her legendary mid-Atlantic accent, and she nails the personality and legacy of Jackie Kennedy. Here we see a woman who wasn't just a president's wife who dressed in magnificent clothes and always smiled and looked glamorous for the cameras. Here we see a woman who was very smart, who was very well aware of both her and her husband's strengths and flaws, and who played a very strong role in cementing the kind of legacy that we remember her family for having today. This film mainly centers around the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the immediate aftermath. It's not a depiction of Jackie Kennedy's whole life, and it's not told in chronological order either. We flip back and forth between the infamous moment where he's shot, to his funeral and procession, to her being interviewed by a reporter, to her planning the funeral, to her being with her children, to her talking with a priest. All these scenes aren't necessarily presented in chronological order, but even so, Natalie Portman's performance, as well as the direction, the writing, the editing, the cinematography, all help it form into one cohesive narrative that you can't stop watching. And I'm honestly shocked that this movie is not going to be in contention for the Oscar for Best Makeup, because the makeup they used to make Natalie Portman look like Jackie Kennedy was just fantastic. I'll talk about that more in my actual video on the makeup contenders for the Oscars. Peter Sarsgaard is also great in this movie as Robert F. Kennedy, and other actors like John Hurt, John Carroll Lynch, Beth Grant, they're good in their supporting roles. Whether you know a lot of information about Jackie Kennedy or not, if you've always been fascinated about the Kennedys and their place in American history and their legacy, this is definitely the film you should check out. Number 9, Denial. This has been quite an underlooked film this year, and I think it deserves a lot more attention than it actually got. It's not a bad film by any means. It got quite great reviews from critics, in fact, but it hasn't really shown up in the awards conversation or in just the art house film circuit in general. But I think it's a film that needs to be seen and a story that needs to be told. It deals with a Holocaust professor named Deborah Lipstadt, who was sued by a historian and Holocaust denier named David Irving because she slammed him in one of her books. And it turned into a trial that lasted for several years, and the trial ended up becoming about having to prove that the Holocaust actually existed. The writing and directing in this movie are great. Rachel Weisz is fantastic as Deborah Lipstadt. Timothy Spall he makes David Irving so evil and shows him why he's such a hateful person that I haven't seen a more evil real-life person portrayed on film since Michael Fassbender as the slave master Edwin Epps in 12 Years a Slave. David Irving is such a vile, disgusting individual that you're just left wondering how on earth someone like him even exists. Tom Wilkinson is also great in this movie as Rachel Weisz's lawyer, and the scenes between him and her when they go to Auschwitz to try and look for viable evidence they can use to prove that the Holocaust really did exist was some of the most chilling and haunting scenes I've seen all year. Many Holocaust films already exist, and many of them are great, but I think this is another worthy one to add to the collection. Not set during the actual Holocaust, but it serves as a potent reminder that the Holocaust really did exist, 6 million people really did lose their lives at the hands of the Nazis, and it provides the important moral that those who try to deny that these things happen will only open the door to this kind of thing possibly happening again in the future. And anyone who studied history like myself knows that the Holocaust must never be allowed to happen again. Number 8, Captain Fantastic. Since Lord of the Rings, Viggo Mortensen's been very careful about the movies he chooses to star in, and thankfully Captain Fantastic is a fantastic movie. Viggo Mortensen plays a man who chose to raise his kids in the wilderness away from society with his wife, but then his wife, who had to seek treatment for a mental illness, commits suicide. That forces him and his kids to interact with society again, and it forces him to examine whether or not raising his kids away from society really was a good idea. Viggo Mortensen is fantastic, and he allows you to understand the conflict of his character, and in some scenes you can understand and agree with him on why he's done certain things as a parent, and in other scenes he makes you question why he's done some things as a parent. Clearly that was the filmmaker's goal, and they succeeded magnificently, because it really forced me to think about, is there one single way to raise a child in this world? And this film proves no, there isn't. And not only is Viggo Mortensen fantastic, but all the actors playing his children were, especially George McKay as the oldest kid, Beau, and the conflict he faces between wanting to go to college and wanting to not disappoint his father, I think was portrayed excellently, and how the kids react to dealing with real-world things for the first time, like drinking Coke or playing video games, was interesting to watch. The other adults in this movie, like Catherine Hahn, Frank Langella, and Ann Dowd, were all great. Overall, though, this movie was a very surprising movie in the fact that just when you think it's going to go one way, it ends up doing the complete opposite. But that's actually the good thing about this movie, because it forces you to re-examine what you think this movie is going to be about and examine it for what it really is. And as a result, I haven't been able to get it out of my mind since I've seen it. And like Denial, this is another movie that's really flown under the radar, but it has managed to get some awards attention. Viggo Mortensen's gotten Golden Globe and Screen Actors Guild Awards nominations, and he really deserves them. And who knows, maybe he'll get an Oscar nomination too. And if he does, he's certainly deserving of it. Number 7, Eye in the Sky. This is one of the best ensemble films I've seen all year, and it's also a very powerful look at the ethics of drone warfare. This was one of the last films of the late great Alan Rickman, rest in peace, but all the other actors in it, like Helen Mirren, Aaron Paul, Barkat Abdi, and Richard McCabe, are also fantastic as well. The central conflict in this movie is a bunch of terrorists gathering at a home in Kenya, and a joint US-UK military operation is debating about whether or not to use a drone strike to kill the terrorist or just go in there and arrest them and bring them to trial. And to make things more complicated, outside of the home where the terrorists are meeting, there's a little girl who's selling bread, which she does every day. And so if they launch this drone strike, they may end up killing the little girl as well. So the question is, do they fire the drone or not fire the drone? And remarkably, this film does not choose to take a side on drone warfare. It's neither pro-drone warfare nor anti-drone warfare. Rather, it gives valid reasons for both sides, and it allows you to be the final judge on whether or not what actually happens at the end is the right thing or not. I'm not going to say what actually happens. You'll have to find that out for yourself. But drone warfare is a very controversial topic in today's society, and I think this is a film that can be used to help bring out a conversation between both sides and try to come up with a compromise on the issue. Number 6, Hell or High Water. This is one of those movies that managed to gain a lot of ground for an art house film, both due to high critical praise and strong audience word of mouth. And it actually managed to get into the top 10 at the box office. And I'm so glad it did, because this movie is fantastic. Chris Pine gives out what I think is the best performance of his whole career. Ben Foster is fantastic as his brother, and Jeff Bridges thankfully redeemed himself from his god-awful performance in Seventh Son that I still don't understand how that didn't get a Razzie nomination. But he's so fantastic here that many people think he will get an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, and I totally think he deserves it. The central conflict here is two brothers who are robbing banks in order to save their family ranch, which is being foreclosed upon, and Jeff Bridges and his partner, played by Gil Birmingham, are going after them. And like Eye in the Sky, this is a film that forces you to look at both sides of the issue here, and you can understand where both sides are coming from. You don't condone Chris Pine and Ben Foster robbing banks, but you understand why they're doing it. You want Jeff Bridges and Gil Birmingham to catch them, but at the same time, you feel like you want to help Chris Pine and Ben Foster save their family home. The final minutes of this movie are some of the most nail-biting, intense moments I've seen all year. The screenplay by Taylor Sheridan is fantastic. The direction by David Mackenzie is fantastic. And the score by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, which is primarily acoustic guitar based, is also fantastic. This is a movie that's been in many people's top 10 lists for very good reasons, and pretty much everything they've said is what I've said here. And if you have not yet seen Hell or High Water and you call yourself a film buff, go see it right now. Number 5, Arrival. This is a very unique science fiction film. If you're the kind of person who likes Star Wars and Independence Day, but you find movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey slow and boring, then Arrival might not be your cup of tea. But if you love smart science fiction that tries to tell an original story, not resort to cliches, and features strong, intelligent characters, then Arrival is a great movie that you have to see. A bunch of alien spaceships invade Earth, and nobody knows why they're here, and people have no idea if these aliens are threatening or not. So it's up to Amy Adams, who's a linguist, to try and find out exactly why these aliens are here. And of course, these aliens have a very unique language that nobody's been able to decipher, so she has to come up with a unique way to communicate with them. Amy Adams is just absolutely fantastic. She makes you believe everything that she's doing, and in every scene she's in, she makes you want to root for her. But Jeremy Renner, Forrest Whitaker, they're great as well. The cinematography in this movie by Bradford Young is just amazing, especially in the early scenes where the spaceships first land and there's just a wave of fog over the ground coming around the ship. Just beautiful imagery. And the score by Johan Johansson is just out of this world. Like, it literally feels like you're listening to a score made on another planet, which is exactly the kind of feeling you want for a movie like this. And unfortunately, Johan Johansson's score borrowed some elements, I think, from the score to Shutter Island, which is why it's not eligible for Oscar consideration. But despite that, the score is just very haunting and beautiful, and it's one of those scores that will stay with you long after the movie is over. Yeah, this movie is also one of the most surprising movies of the year. There are some revelations in the film that were never ever hinted in the trailer. And that's a good thing, because today too many trailers often just display the entire movie in 2.5 minutes. But the revelations that are experienced in this film just blew my mind. I was like, oh my god. And as a result, the film becomes an entirely different film. And it's because of those revelations that really make Arrival stand out as probably one of the best science fiction films of this decade. It's definitely one of those films that's going to be analyzed and studied by film students, screenwriters, directors, actors for years to come. We need unique science fiction films in an age where science fiction films come out almost all the time, and thankfully Arrival is a very unique science fiction film that will stick around for decades to come. Number 4, The Witch. I'm not usually a big fan of horror movies. I don't really like excessive blood and gore, and plus horror movies use so many cliches that many people pretty much gave up on the genre. But we've had kind of a horror movie renaissance in the last few years, because there have been a lot of horror movies that have been actually getting praise from both critics and audiences. And when I found out that The Witch had been screened at the Sundance Film Festival, that really got my attention, because you don't usually hear about horror films being screened at the Sundance Film Festival. And then when I went to see it, I was just blown away. This is probably one of the best horror films I've ever seen in my life, and I really mean it. I was genuinely terrified of things that were happening in this movie. Unlike most horror films, which just resort to jump scares and cliches, this film was very quiet. It took its time to reveal everything. It didn't give you obvious clues as to what was going to happen. And as a result, when something did happen, I wasn't necessarily screaming like a little girl or covering my eyes like you would in a film with blood, guts, and gore. But I had goosebumps all over my body. I kept thinking to myself, oh, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And I was just genuinely curled up in a ball of suspense on the inside. The acting in this film was fantastic, especially from Anya Taylor-Joy as the main. She definitely gives one of the best breakthrough performances of this year. And I feel bad that she hasn't been getting major awards nominations, because if I were an Oscar voter, I would definitely nominate her for Best Actress, because I genuinely feel her performance is that great. Because she makes you sympathize with her, but she also makes you wonder if maybe something is going on and there's something she hasn't revealed to everyone else. This movie literally makes you wonder if anyone is innocent here, because the events that happen are so scary that nobody has any idea who's causing it. Cinematography is beautiful, and it really paints a bleak, desolate landscape that the film wants you to feel. And as a result, it becomes the perfect setting for a horror film. And the film also is unique for having Shakespearean-like dialogue, because this is set in the early 1630s during the Puritan era of Massachusetts. And while some people might find that dialogue gimmicky, I thought it worked perfectly for a film like this. And I thought it only added to the fear and tension and paranoia that happens. And this film not only is an examination of supernatural forces like witches, again, witches here are thought of in the religious sense, not like the kind of witches you'd see in Harry Potter or The Wizard of Oz, but it also addresses paranoia and delusion that can tear a family apart. And the way in which it tears this family apart is pretty devastating once the film is over, and it leaves an imprint in your mind. And the ending alone is probably one of the most haunting endings you will ever see in your life. Robert Eggers proves he is a director to watch with this film, and I truly hope he has a bright future ahead of him. Number 3, Manchester by the Sea. This film is a very powerful look at grief and how it manifests itself differently in each person. Casey Affleck is fantastic as a man who has to assume custody of his teenage nephew when his brother dies of heart failure. But unfortunately, he's reluctant to do so because he's still grieving his own personal tragedy, one that most people would probably not wish on their own worst enemy. Affleck's performance is very quiet and nuanced. It's not really showy and dramatic with screaming and yelling and things like that. But nevertheless, he makes you completely interested in what his character does. Even if it's not always something you may agree with, you can at least understand where he's coming from. And for that, I hope Casey Affleck wins the Oscar for Best Actor. This film also has a fantastic screenplay by Kenneth Lonergan, who also directs it. And I hope it wins Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars. Lucas Hedges is fantastic as Casey Affleck's nephew, Patrick. He gives, in my opinion, the best breakthrough performance of the year. And although he's only 20 years old, I think he has a very, very bright future ahead of him in Hollywood, and I hope he gets cast in many more good roles. Michelle Williams is also fantastic. She maybe only has 10 to 15 minutes of screen time, but she owns every scene she's in. Kyle Chandler is also great in this film as well. Matthew Broderick even makes a cameo. The cinematography is gorgeous and really captures what life in small-town Massachusetts would be like during the winter. And the score by Leslie Barber is heartbreaking. Many of the most heartbreaking scenes in this film are often shown with loud music and no dialogue. But the loudness of the music doesn't make you want to cover your ears. It actually highlights the dramatic nature of the scene, and it shows just how devastating that scene really is, because this happens mostly in the scenes where some devastating revelation takes place. The best thing about this film is that even though there's big Hollywood talent involved, it doesn't feel Hollywoodized or sugar-coated like a lot of films that deal with the subject of grief might do. It captures a very raw, honest look at grief, and it does so in a way where you can't always predict what the final outcome will be. Just when you think the film is going to go in one direction, it goes in another. But you don't feel like you've been duped when that happens, because as the film shows, life is a very unexpected thing, and it does not always go in the direction that we think it will. And that's what this film captures beautifully the most. And I think that's why it will resonate with a lot of people who see it. Number 2, Moonlight. If you want to talk about a powerful movie-going experience, this was one of the most powerful movie-going experiences I've had all year. Moonlight is based on an unpublished play, and it actually feels like I'm watching a play when it's on the screen. But that's what makes it so great, in my opinion. Moonlight is about a man named Chiron at 3 different stages in his life: as a preteen, as a teen, and as a young adult. And it's literally presented like a 3-act play, and it literally says on the screen 1, 2, 3, and in each section it shows him at a different age. Chiron is trying to deal with these feelings of being gay that he's been aware of since childhood, and at each stage in his life he's trying to find out the best way to deal with that, because the environment in which he lives isn't necessarily the healthiest environment for him to be open about who he is. And not only is he struggling with being gay, but he also has to deal with the fact that his mother is a drug addict, and that his mentor, as nice of a person he is also a drug dealer. All the actors who play Chiron at different stages of his life, Alex Hibbert as a kid, Ashton Sanders as a teen, and Trevante Rhodes as an adult, they're all equally fantastic, and I can't pick who's better than the other two, because I think they're all equally great. Mahershala Ali is great as the drug dealer Juan, who's Chiron's mentor when he was a kid. Naomi Harris is magnificent as Chiron's mother. Janelle Monáe is also really great as Juan's girlfriend, Teresa. And Chiron's friend Kevin, I forget the actors who play him when he's younger, but he's played as an adult by Andre Holland. All those actors are really great too. The cinematography is fantastic, particularly the scenes that are shot at night. The music is some of the most haunting music I have heard all year. I'm a big sucker for piano scores and synthesizer scores, and they're blended beautifully together here by the composer Nicholas Bertel. The writing and directing by Barry Jenkins is excellent. This is only his second film, but I hope he has a long future in Hollywood because this is some of the best directing and writing I've seen all year. There's been a lot of talk about the need for more diversity in Hollywood, both in front of and behind the camera, as well as the types of movies and TV shows that are put out. And Moonlight, thankfully, is a step in the right direction because it shows a lot of things that we've seen in a lot of movies featuring a mostly white cast, and this film's cast is pretty much entirely black. But here we get to see those struggles from a different perspective. It really shows just how diverse of a place America really is and why we need to celebrate that diversity. And while Moonlight does highlight a lot of things that many African Americans will be able to relate to, it also has many things that almost anybody of any race will be able to relate to, such as growing up with a parent who's not there for you, or having to deal with being gay in an environment that's not gay friendly. But this movie isn't just about those things. It's a movie about trying to live your life and be who you are, and I hope this movie will be around for many decades to come and be studied by everyone. Actors, directors, composers, writers, cinephiles, critics, and even the general public, because I think this is a movie that everyone should see at least once in their life. Alright, here we are. My number one best film of 2016. And that is La La Land. This was the last film I saw in 2016. I heard a lot of hype going into it, and boy oh boy did it live up to the hype and then some. I was a big fan of Damien Chazelle's 2014 film Whiplash, and I was wondering, could he top himself with what he did there? And oh my god, he certainly did. Everything in this movie is perfection. Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone's performances and chemistry with each other are fantastic. This is the third time Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone have played a couple in a movie together, and this is their best chemistry that they've ever had. You can understand each of their motivations as they try to become successful in their careers. Ryan Gosling plays a jazz musician, Emma Stone plays an actress. You can understand why they're frustrated at themselves or at each other for their careers not being what they want them to be, and you can understand why they take the steps they take in order to try and at least achieve some sort of financial sustainability. But you also understand their struggle to just find the purity in their craft, because that's something that a lot of entertainers struggle with, and it's not easy for them to find. The most noteworthy aspect of this film is that it's a musical, and oh my god, this is a fantastic movie musical. It totally pays tribute to the old musicals of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but still feels like a very fresh modern-day story. The songs are wonderful. Justin Hurwitz, Benj Pasek, and Justin Paul create some fantastic songs. City of Stars is probably my favorite, but other great songs include Audition the Fools Who Dream, Start a Fire, Another Day of Sun. There's literally not a single bad song in this movie. The choreography is fantastic. The opening song features people dancing on and around cars on a Los Angeles highway, and oh my god, I don't know how they put that together. The individual dance sequences between Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, particularly when they go to an observatory and in a sequence near the end of the film, oh my god, they are so magical that many of the great choreographers of Broadway and movies who are no longer alive, like Gene Kelly, Jerome Robbins, Bob Fosse, Gower Champion, Michael Bennett, they're all up in heaven probably wishing they could come back down to earth and choreograph this movie. Because that's one of the best things that this movie pays tribute to, the song and dance routines that you would find in movie musicals like An American in Paris, Fiddler on the Roof, The Sound of Music, etc. But like I said before, it's very much a modern-day story. Some other actors make smaller appearances in this film, like J.K. Simmons, John Legend, Rosemarie DeWitt, Finn Wittrock, and they're all great too for the limited screen time they have. But ultimately, this is Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone's movie. And like I said before, they're just fantastic together. This is their best collaboration that they've done yet with each other. Damien Chazelle's direction. He's only 31 years old, but man, he pulled this off in a way that probably most directors who are twice his age would not be able to pull off. He seriously has a very bright future ahead of him in Hollywood after this, and he was actually just signed on to team up with Ryan Gosling again to direct a biopic about Neil Armstrong. So if that isn't a sign of success in Hollywood, I don't know what is. For a long time, people have said this is the front runner to win Best Picture at the Oscars, and I can totally see why now. Granted, some films I have not yet seen because they might be out in limited release now but have not come to my area yet, like Silence, Hidden Figures, Patriots Day, A Monster Calls. They could be more Oscar-worthy than this, but I can't tell yet since I haven't seen them. But La La Land, it's just so fantastic in everything it does that I simply have to describe it as pure magic. Because that's what it really is. It's the kind of movie that movie musical lovers will absolutely love, and based on what my friends have said, it's also the kind of movie that even non-movie musical lovers will love. It really is that good. If you have not yet seen La La Land, you need to see it now, because it truly is one of the most magical, breathtaking movie experiences you will ever have in your life. That's all I have to say about my 15 best films of 2016. Please let me know in the comments below what your best films of 2016 were. Please subscribe to my channel if you have not yet already done so, and I will be back soon with more videos on the Oscars, Golden Globes, and all the other award shows coming out in the next few weeks and months. I'll see you guys later. Bye!